Frontier discussed the future of Elite Dangerous in a brand new interview with Rock Paper Shotgun, in which the developers also assure players, "We're not trying to be done with Odyssey." The interview then took place with the website Rock Paper Shotgun and Elite's lead game designer Luke Betterton, as well as senior producer Samantha Marsh. The piece opened right off the bat with the situation on Odyssey, saying that the Thargoid in the room is Elite Dangerous Odyssey. Launched in May last year, Elite's second expansion was, to put it lightly, not well received by Elite's community. Complaints ranged from extensive bugs and performance issues to more fundamental criticisms about the implementation of the expansion's on-foot exploration and FPS combat. Now, naturally, whilst many of us players are no longer dwelling on these issues, they are nonetheless a fundamental issue surrounding Odyssey. The article, quite rightly, cites the expansion's mostly negative rating on Steam, despite 13 updates and well over a year since release. Charts found on Google Trends also show that player interest in Elite Dangerous never really recovered. It's also interesting to see how the Google Trends information correlates pretty much accurately with the player numbers shown on Steam charts. And yes, I know not everyone is a fan of Steam charts, but it's interesting to see how this information correlates with Google Trends, and we all know that Google is very efficient at collecting this type of data. We can also see that despite a very positive and welcoming reception to Update 13, which personally I do think was very good, Google Trends nonetheless, as well as Steam charts, show that the update didn't significantly increase player interest or player numbers. The Rock Paper Shotgun then certainly opened on a rather negative note, but it's a valid point and one that was put directly to Frontier. Frontier's response was, "The thing I would say is that we're listening to that feedback. It doesn't fall on deaf ears. We want to continue to make the game better." There's never a day that goes by where we don't have the conversation about looking at this thing and going, "We can still make this better. There are things that we could do better here." So, no specifics about what those things are, but nonetheless we do know that Frontier are continuing to focus on the future of the game. The unfortunate side effect of this is that it did lead to the cancellation of all console development. However, as we know, Frontier are planning on releasing a transfer process to allow players to transfer their save from console to PC, at least for those who have access to a suitable PC. Now, for some reason, there's still no news on this, but last I heard, we was expecting this to occur at some point in September, so just maybe we'll hear news on this quite soon. Also coming in the next few weeks is access to Elite Dangerous 4.0. Again, this is something that we've known for a little while now, but Rock Paper Shotgun sought a bit more information on this. They wanted to know whether it meant Frontier are planning to integrate Odyssey into the base game, or perhaps phase out parts of Elite that players didn't like. To this, Frontier said, "We're not trying to be done with Odyssey. Odyssey is a bit of a platform that allows us to be able to add more content to the game. It allows us to work in new ways, to allow us to give players new ways to interact with the game, and it has done a great job of that." So the takeaway point here is that all current active development on Elite Dangerous takes place on the 4.0 client. Luke Betterton went on to say, "We work in 4.0. It includes a lot of tools we have available to us on the development side to be able to create things, do things at a faster pace, and do things at a higher quality." It was also pointed out that 4.0 is crucial to the balance of the team, making sure that they can really gear up to the fixes and content that can be provided, whatever that actually means. So hopefully perhaps more things a little bit like Update 13, and just maybe more things to interact with. Frontier also went on to say that 4.0 is about ensuring that Elite can continue to look fresh and shiny. Now, I think that subject is a little bit open to debate here, just interjecting a little bit of personal opinion here. Whilst some areas in Odyssey are certainly visually impressive and much better than what you can find in Horizons, that's certainly not always the case. In fact, you don't have to look very far around the internet to find comments from people who continue to play in Horizons who don't really like the visual quality that you see in Odyssey. Of course, though, all of this is going to be subjective and everyone's going to have their own take on this. Now, moving further into the interview, here Frontier discuss their changing approach to the future of narrative for Elite and how the narrative is moving directly into the game rather than relying on external sites like Galnet. This was very apparent with the cutscene that was put into Update 13, as well as some of the props and scenes that we got to see in the star system HIP 22460. They also touched on the subject that whilst much of the Elite story appears to be curated, that's not necessarily the case, and that some of it was dependent on what players did. That's something I may have personally missed there, because I don't really see how players would have had the opportunity to dictate the performance, the failure of success of the Proteus wave. That seemed to be pretty much inevitable, and that it would have occurred regardless of what players may or may have not done. Either way, it was a great event to see, and Frontier have assured us that it isn't going to be a one-off spectacle. They said the change in the HIP 22460 star system has given the Thargoids a ton of tools to be able to shift that balance, that being the balance of power. There are players currently in that system struggling to survive who previously would call themselves veteran anti-Thargoid pilots. So the idea here is to heat up the conflict between humanity and the Thargoids, Frontier say, and that their approach now is to make more effective use of Elite's toolbox. They say there'll be a combination of re-engaging with things and areas and features that players are familiar with now. But there's also going to be some situations where there are new features as well for players to engage with. And this feeds into the escalating Thargoid threat. The next statement really does confirm something which many of us have suspected for quite a while. We've been suspecting to see a new grind for new anti-Xeno weapons, and these ought to be based on the new Guardian type of technology that we're seeing the engineers actually request. So yeah, very likely this is going to lead to a new type of weapons and players having to engage in Elite in a way to unlock that. For this, Frontier say, we're going to reward players who invest their time to explore and find things to re-engage again with the sort of content that we have. There's going to be new things to play with, new toys. We're very much looking forward to seeing what happens. Now for me, I'd really like to see this deliver a brand new ship into Elite Dangerous. After all, the last new ship that arrived into the game was way back in 2018. So yeah, nearly 4 years at this point. In fact, I'd be curious to know whether or not another space game out there that gets regular updates has gone 4 years without any brand new ships. Seems unlikely, and personally I can't think of such a title. At any rate, whilst Frontier talk of new toys here and they potentially could be new ships, I suspect it's more likely they're going to be modules and weapons. The article concludes on a very odd note here, something that I think is a little bit questionable. This seems to be coming from Rock Paper Shotgun themselves rather than Frontier, and it says, alongside Destiny, which was released in the same year, Elite Dangerous is one of the pioneers of live service gaming. Now this seems quite a stretch to me. After all, live service games were about long before 2014. To cite a few examples, Warframe, Team Fortress 2, League of Legends, Guild Wars 2 are all games that could perhaps better be considered pioneers of the live service industry rather than Elite Dangerous. So not really quite sure where Rock Paper Shotgun were going with that point, other than to say that Elite's ideas, Elite's game features are not set in stone and they're always open to change. Perhaps a point to be made here will be the twists coming in Update 14, a broader part of the story then relating to the conflict between humans and Thargoids. So there we have it, an interview between Frontier and Rock Paper Shotgun. Overall, not really a whole load of new information, but that said, it is an interesting interview, primarily because it really does give us an insight into how Frontier view the game. They're very keenly aware of many players' feelings towards Odyssey, and whilst they've been trying to fix it over the past year, they still feel that they've got much more to do. More importantly, they seem to be open to changing their approach to the way they deal with Elite and they deliver that content. Update 13 was definitely a taster of that, and if that's anything to go by, then Update 14 should be very interesting indeed. Meanwhile, within the next few days, hopefully, we should be getting more information on Horizons 4.0, as well as perhaps more information on the console save transfer. Now we do know that one thing has been brought up, that is the inability for players on Horizons 4.0 to instance together with Odyssey players and vice versa. This is definitely something that needs further clarification, and Frontier have said they're going to get that for the players. It's a big concern because it risks fragmenting the player base even further than it currently is. Right now, Horizons 3.8 players cannot instance with Odyssey players. Once you add Horizons 4.0 into the mix, It means that the PC version of Elite is going to have 3 main clients for Elite Dangerous, each of them having the inability to interact with each other, so a very strange situation for an online game and live service to be in. At any rate, we should be hearing more information on this pretty soon now. If you're interested in checking out the full interview, do take a look. It's actually worth a good read there. You can find a link in the video description. That then brings us to an end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.